She chose the human forbidden zone over marrying a tyrant. The warrant arrived before I finished reading it. 7 warships, it said, 1 fugitive. Return within 40 cycles or the Dominion considers the matter a declaration of war. I read those words sitting inside a one-person survey pod hurtling through empty space, with a fractured secondary arm, a half-broken translator, and exactly 0 plans beyond the one I had already executed, which was to flee. My name is Valith. I am the last surviving daughter of House Ketharavel, a noble family that stopped being noble the moment High Sovereign Malgrath crushed my father's fleet and absorbed our territories into his growing empire. That was 2 years ago. Since then I had been kept at court, watched, managed, useful as a symbol of conquest. And then, 6 days ago, the announcement came that I was to become Malgrath's 7th political consort. His 6th consort had vanished 11 months into the arrangement, his 5th 8 months. The ones before that nobody spoke of anymore. I did not wait for the ceremony. I had one advantage. Malgrath believed that every living creature in the galaxy feared the human forbidden zone more than they feared him. He was wrong about me, because I had stopped fearing anything the moment I understood that staying meant a slow and quiet death. So I bribed a freighter captain with the last valuable things I owned, dropped into a survey pod at the edge of the quarantine boundary, and burned toward the blue-green world that every empire in the known galaxy had agreed, without much discussion, to simply leave alone. The relay buoy at the zone's edge blinked in 17 languages. I caught the translation in my damaged matrix. It read something like, "Entry not advised, occupants unpredictable, proceed only with full understanding of consequences." I had read those words before in cartography archives. Every species had, at some point, decided that this warning was reason enough to stay away. I decided it was reason enough to go in. The pod hit atmosphere badly. I had not trained as a pilot, and the manual was written for a species with 2 arms, not 4. I clipped something tall and green, bounced twice across soft ground, and came to a stop in a wet, dark forest that smelled like nothing I had ever encountered before, which is to say it smelled alive, in a way that felt almost aggressive. I was on the ground, one arm fractured, translator sparking, when I heard footsteps. She was small, smaller than I expected any intelligent creature to be. She wore simple clothes the color of old bark and carried a woven basket with mushrooms in it, which I would not understand the significance of until much later. She stopped when she saw me. I watched her face. I had studied human behavioral files in the archives, brief as they were, and every description of human threat response involved noise and rapid movement and what the files described as a fight-or-flight escalation pattern. She did not escalate. She crouched down, set her basket on the ground, and looked at me the way one might look at a complicated but non-urgent problem. She said something. My translator caught fragments. "Are you hurt? Can you move? Do you need help?" She did not ask what I was. She did not ask where I came from. She asked if I needed help. I did not know what to do with that, so I said nothing, and she pulled a small metal container from her coat, pressed it into the one hand I could still use, and waited. It was warm. Whatever was inside was warm and smelled faintly bitter and slightly sweet and entirely alien to me, and I held it because I did not know what else to do. Her name was Dara. I learned that when she touched her own chest and said it slowly, watching my face to see if I understood. I told her my name. She repeated it carefully, got it almost right, and nodded, as if we had now completed a reasonable introduction under the circumstances. She helped me to my feet, all 4 of them. She was not strong enough to do this alone, so she found a long stick and used it as a lever under my good side, and between the 2 of us we managed. She was patient about it. She did not seem embarrassed by the difficulty or frustrated by how long it took. She simply kept trying different angles until one worked. We walked for about an hour through the forest. She talked the whole time, slowly, pointing at things and saying their names. "Tree, mud, root, bird," she said, pointing up, and I looked and saw something small and winged and entirely unbothered by us. She seemed pleased that I looked. The village was small, maybe 60 or 70 people by rough count, living in timber buildings with smoke rising from chimneys, children running between the structures with a freedom of movement that looked almost reckless. When we arrived, the children stopped and stared at me. 3 of them immediately moved toward my bioluminescent patches, which were cycling through pale blue and white because I was anxious, and reached out to touch. Dara said something sharp and they stopped, but she was smiling when she said it, and I understood that the word she used was not cruel, just firm. The man who appeared to be in charge of the village had a gray beard, a serious face, and the expression of someone who had, over a long life, developed a high tolerance for unexpected complications. His name was Tom. He looked at me for a long moment, and then said something that Dara translated with visible amusement. He said, "Great, another one. Another one." Dara took me to a small building at the edge of the village. Inside, sitting at a low table across from two elderly human women, was a Vorkai diplomat I recognized from Galactic Council files. His name was Sael. He had been sent 8 months ago as part of a Vorkai survey mission, and had apparently simply stayed. He was playing a human board game involving small carved figures on a grid, and he was losing badly, which he seemed aware of but not distressed by. He waved at me without looking up. I sat down on the floor because the human furniture was not built for my proportions, and looked at Sael and said, in our shared diplomatic dialect, "What are you doing?" He moved one of his carved figures. The older woman across from him made a quiet sound of satisfaction, and moved hers. Sael sighed. "Losing," he said. "At chess. It is a human game. Do you play?" I told him I did not. He said, "You will learn. They will teach you whether you ask or not." He was right about that. The weeks that followed were not what I had planned for, because I had not planned for anything beyond escape. I had expected to survive in wilderness, perhaps to hide, perhaps to slowly starve while evading detection. Instead, I was given a room in Dara's house. I was given food I did not recognize and had to learn to eat in small amounts until my body adjusted. I was given language lessons every morning by Dara, who turned out to be extraordinarily patient and completely immune to the awkwardness of teaching a four-armed bioluminescent alien the vocabulary of a human life. I learned fire, water, morning, cold, warm, enough, more, please, thank you. I learned that please and thank you were used constantly, reflexively, in ways that had no transactional meaning, as if the habit of courtesy had become so embedded it ran without thought. On Cathara Prime, courtesy was strategic. You used it to signal status or desire. Here it seemed to be something closer to breathing. Tom checked on me every few days. He asked questions through Dara's translation, not about my politics or my species or my capabilities. He asked what I missed from home, and whether I was sleeping, and whether the food was close enough to what my body needed. He asked once if I was afraid, and I said yes, and he nodded, as if that was a completely reasonable answer that required no further discussion. I asked Dara one evening why no one had asked me to leave. She looked at me as if the question had not occurred to her as something worth asking. She said, "You came here because you needed to be somewhere safe. Why would we tell you to leave?" I said, "Because I am not human. Because I am very large and I glow in the dark and I cannot fit through most of your doorways and my presence here could bring trouble." She said, "It could. That is true. But you are here, and you needed help. The rest we will deal with if it comes." It came faster than either of us expected. Sael found me in the early morning, moving with the quick, clipped stride that meant diplomatic emergency. A Cathara probe had entered the outer system. He had intercepted the broadcast on a portable receiver he apparently carried everywhere, a habit from his survey days. The message was from Malgrath. It was addressed to whatever authority governed this world, a question he framed with the contempt of someone who did not expect a satisfying answer. It informed that authority that the fugitive Valith of House Cathara Vel was wanted under Dominion law, that her presence in unauthorized territory constituted a political offense, and that non-compliance with her return would be interpreted as a hostile act against the Dominion, which currently maintains 7 warships at the edge of this system. 7 warships. That was not a negotiation. That was a demonstration. Sael's hands were shaking slightly. He said, "This is not a small threat. Malgrath has the ships and the willingness. He glassed a populated moon 6 years ago over a trade disagreement." I knew. I had been at court when the reports came in. Malgrath had not seemed troubled by them. We brought the message to Tom. He read the translation slowly, twice. He folded the paper and put it in the pocket of his worn jacket. He stood in the cool morning outside his house and looked at the sky for a moment. He said, "Write back. Tell them she is not here." Sael stared at him. He said, "That is a direct lie to a Dominion sovereign who has 7 warships." Tom said, "Yes." Sael said, "He will not simply accept that." Tom said, "No, probably not. But it buys time, and time is useful." He said it with a calm that I could not reconcile with the situation. 7 Cathara warships could reduce this village to ash in under an hour. Any military analyst in the galaxy would have told you the outcome of that engagement before the question finished being asked. And yet Tom was standing in his jacket in the morning air, unbothered, thinking about what came next the way a person thinks about weather. I asked him, through Dara, whether he understood what 7 Dominion warships meant. He said, "I understand what 7 warships means. I also understand that the people flying them want something from us, which means for the moment they are not shooting. People who want things can be dealt with. People who are only shooting cannot. He sent the denial message. Then he made some other transmissions, short ones, through channels I did not recognize and Sayel could not identify. He would not explain what they were. He simply said, "Let us see what comes." What came 40 hours later was not what any of us expected. A human vessel appeared at the edge of the system, then 3 more, then another cluster of 7, then ships that were harder to count because they did not hold formation the way Cathara warships did. They spread, positioned, filled space in a pattern that looked almost casual, but placed them between Malgrath's fleet and the planet, with a completeness that left no useful angle uncovered. Sayel was watching on his receiver, and his voice had gone very quiet. He said, "Where did these come from?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "How many?" I said, "I stopped counting at 30. He said nothing for a while. Then he said, "The Dominion fleet is not moving." Malgrath's ships had been sitting at the edge of the system in the arrangement that preceded a demand. They were not in that arrangement anymore. They were holding, which was not the same thing as retreating, but it was very different from advancing. A human transmission went to the Dominion flagship. Dara translated it for me from a recording Sayel captured. The words were simple. They said, "You have entered an advisory zone. The individual you are seeking has requested shelter under our informal protocols. We suggest you think carefully about your next move, and take as much time as you need." Malgrath responded with a recitation of the Dominion fleet's combat specifications. It was the kind of response he used to make in council chambers, detailed and cold, designed to communicate that he had thought through the consequences of any opposition and found them acceptable. The human reply came back 11 seconds later. It said, "We have read your fleet specifications. We would like you to read ours. A data package is attached. Please take all the time you need." I do not know what was in that data package. I asked Tom later and he smiled and said only, "Context." He would not say more. Malgrath's fleet went silent for 53 minutes. I know the exact number because Sayel counted, quietly, with a kind of focused anxiety I had never seen on a Vorkai before. When the transmission came back, it announced a withdrawal for diplomatic review and reconsideration, which was the language that empires used when they needed to leave without admitting they had decided against something. The ships turned and left the system, all 7 of them, without firing, without demanding, without any of the actions that Malgrath had made his signature across 2 decades of expansion. Sayel sat down on the ground. He was not built for sitting on the ground, being a Vorkai, but he did it anyway, and for a while he just sat there looking at his receiver. He said, "That does not happen." I said, "It happened." He said, "Malgrath does not withdraw." I said, "He just did." There was a long silence. He said, "I think I will stay here a while longer." Tom appeared with 2 cups and offered one to each of us. Tea, which I had learned to drink over the past weeks, taken carefully because it was very hot and human hands were apparently less sensitive to heat than mine. I accepted it. Tom sat down beside us on the ground, comfortable in the way that people are comfortable who have sat on the ground many times before and found it sufficient. I asked him, what was in the data package? He said, "Information about our history. What we have done when people decided to take things from us, how those situations resolved." I said, "And that was enough." He looked at the sky. He said, "History is the most honest argument. You do not have to threaten anyone with the future if the past is clear enough." I thought about that for a long time. I got a message 3 days later from my cousin on Cathara Prime. It had been routed through 4 relay stations and was compressed to almost nothing to avoid detection. It said that Malgrath had declared me dead in absentia. House Cathara Vel was formally dissolved. My name had been removed from every official record in the Dominion. I read it twice. I sat with it in the quiet of Dara's house, in the room she had given me, on the sleeping surface she had built reinforced to hold my weight, and I felt the weight of it settle. I was no longer a fugitive. You cannot chase a dead person. I was also no longer anything that my old life had built. No house, no title, no political standing, no name on any record anywhere in the empire that had shaped every year of my existence. Outside the window, which I had to crouch to see through, the sky was turning the particular orange-edged blue that happened every evening here, and that I had slowly stopped finding wrong, and started finding something else. A word Dara had taught me recently. She had pointed at a view very much like this one and said, "Pretty." I had understood the word before. I had not felt it before. Dara appeared at the doorway. She looked at the message in my hand and then at my face, which was cycling through colors I could not fully control because my emotional regulation was not at its best, and she did not ask what it said. She came and sat beside me and stayed quiet, which was a thing I had not expected humans to be good at, given how much they generally enjoyed talking. But she sat and said nothing, and her presence was enough. After a while I said, "It is finished. Back there, everything is finished." She said, "Yes, I thought that might happen." I said, "I should feel worse about this." She said, "You ran from a man who would have killed you. The life you left behind was already ending. You just got out before it did." I said, "I did not run because I was brave." She said, "I know. You ran because you had no other option. That is still running. It still counts." I looked at the orange-edged sky. I thought about the ships that had appeared without anyone asking for them, 30 or more, positioning themselves between danger and a village because someone had sent some short transmissions and trusted that the rest would follow. I thought about Tom lying to a sovereign without hesitation. I thought about Dara crouching in a forest to help a creature she had never seen before, pressing warmth into its hand before she even knew if it was safe. I had come to the human forbidden zone because every empire feared it. I had thought that meant it was dangerous. I had thought dangerous meant strong in the way that Malgrath was strong, in the way that fleets and threats and consequences were strong. I understood now that I had been thinking about the wrong kind of strength. The Forbidden Zone was not quarantined because humans were monsters. It was quarantined because no one had found the edge of what they would do for each other, and that uncertainty was the most unsettling thing the galaxy had ever encountered. Not because humans were violent, because they were not afraid of the people who were. Dara made tea. She brought it and sat beside me and watched the sky go dark. I held the warm cup and thought about the word she had taught me. The word for something that is good to look at, that gives a feeling without needing to explain itself. I thought, this is where I am now, this strange small village with its timber houses and its smoke and its board games and its unreasonably courageous elder and the woman sitting next to me who taught me words every morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. I did not choose this place out of wisdom or planning. I chose it because the alternative was a slow and certain end, and the zone's reputation for being unknowable seemed, at the time, better odds than the certainty of what waited for me at home. But I had been here long enough now to understand something that the Galactic Cartography Archives had entirely missed in their warning buoys and their quarantine designations. This place was not dangerous because it was full of threats. It was dangerous because it was full of people who had decided, collectively and without much ceremony, that some things were worth standing for, regardless of the size of whatever was standing against them. And they had somehow made a home out of that decision. A quiet, smoky, board game-playing, tea-drinking home, where a Vorkai diplomat stayed 8 months past his assignment, and an alien fugitive was given a reinforced sleeping surface and vocabulary lessons, and nobody asked her to be anything other than what she was while she figured out what that meant. The sky was fully dark now. The stars were out. Some of them I recognized. Some were new to me, visible only from this hemisphere, this angle, this ground. Dara pointed at one and said a word. I did not know it yet. I asked her what it meant. She said, "Home, that one we call home." I looked at the star she pointed at. Then I looked at the village behind us, warm and lit and alive. I said, "Yes." She looked at me. I said, "I understand that word now." She smiled. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. We sat there in the dark until the tea was cold, and neither of us moved to go inside, and the stars above us burned the way they always had, indifferent and permanent and very far away, and it did not matter at all, because I was not looking at them anymore. I was already home.